My best friend's wife kissed me at every party until I finally crossed the line. He never suspected a thing. Full story. When I was newly married and we purchased our first home, we moved into a great old neighborhood. The neighborhood was in transition, and young families began buying up the homes vacated by the older owners. The cool part was the neighborhood had a great neighborhood association. The president was an attractive blonde with small perky breasts. Although she was small on top, she did have curvy hips and ass. I was trying to be good. She had a lot of charisma and I was attracted to her. She and I'll call her B, and her husband became our best friends in the neighborhood. We spent countless Friday or Saturday nights drinking, talking, and playing cards. One thing I did notice was every time we drank, B always kissed me on the lips when we parted. I thought it was strange, and perhaps it was cultural. I never kissed my black friends' wives on the lips. I began to plot how to get B alone. She worked near my office, and I suggested we go to lunch. The fear I had was if I made a move, and I had misinterpreted those kisses on the lips the wrong way, I would ruin our friendship along with my marriage. I was always a risk taker. We had a great lunch and I probed into B's marriage to see if she was happy or not. She wasn't completely clear, and when I dropped her off at her office, I leaned in for a kiss. She froze, and she wasn't as casual as she had been with those kisses she initiated. I thought I had fucked up. My mind began to race. How was I going to explain this to her husband? How was I going to explain this to my wife? She left the car quietly. I didn't speak to B for the rest of the week, and then we saw them that Friday evening and she was cool. We were all drinking, and I figured she'd brushed my kiss aside. I told myself I wouldn't try that again. We were all young with no kids, and we loved to discuss politics. We were discussing presidential succession. B got the succession wrong. I laughed because she was very smart. Then she secretly told me that if I could prove her wrong, she would give me a blow job. I figured it was the liquor talking, based on that frozen kiss. But every time she saw me after that night, she would remind me of the bet. After about 4 reminders, I said fuck it. I proved her wrong and booked a hotel room at the Marriott near her office. What happened in that room changed everything. We didn't just collect on a bet. We crossed into something neither of us had a name for yet, something that would consume the next 2 years of both our lives. We left the hotel around 10:00 p.m., each heading home to our respective spouses, and I sat in my car in my driveway for a long time before I went inside. I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of the most complicated, exhilarating, and ultimately devastating chapter of my adult life. I keep telling myself I should have known better. Maybe I did know better, and I just didn't care. You have to understand what my life looked like on the surface at that point. My wife Claire and I had been together since college. We were high school sweethearts who ended up at the same university, which sounds romantic until you realize that sometimes people stay together more out of habit and familiarity than genuine passion. Claire was a good woman, stable, kind, responsible. She was the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday, kept a color-coded calendar, and had opinions about throw pillow arrangements. I loved her, I want to be clear about that, but there was a version of love that had grown comfortable and quiet in a way that, at 28, felt a little like slow suffocation. We didn't fight. We didn't argue. We just sort of coexisted in the same tastefully decorated space, like 2 houseplants that had learned to share the same pot without crowding each other. B was the opposite of comfortable. B was electric. She walked into a room and people reoriented toward her the way sunflowers track light. Her husband Ryan was a decent enough guy, a contractor, big shoulders, firm handshake, the kind of man who coached youth sports on weekends even though they didn't have kids yet. He adored B in the way some men adore things they feel they've earned but don't quite understand. He would bring her wine before she asked for it. He would touch the small of her back reflexively, like checking that she was still there. And yet, B had kissed me on the lips in their driveway while Ryan stood 10 feet away loading the recycling into the bin, and Ryan hadn't so much as blinked. I'd spent weeks trying to figure out if that meant something or nothing. Turned out it meant everything. After the hotel, we established a rhythm. It sounds cold to describe it that way, but that's what it was, a rhythm, a routine folded quietly inside the larger routine of our regular lives. B and I worked near each other, which had originally just been a geographical coincidence, and now became the scaffolding of our arrangement. We'd meet for lunch 2 or 3 times a week, and maybe once or twice a month we'd find an afternoon that worked. We never used our phones carelessly. We were smart about it, almost clinical. B was the one who set the rules at the beginning. No text that couldn't be explained innocently. No gifts. No lingering glances at the Friday night card games. We'd sit across from Ryan and Claire and we'd be normal. We'd be friends. We'd pour wine and argue about whoever was running for office and laugh at the same jokes we always laughed at. And afterward B would kiss me on the lips at the end of the night, same as always. While Ryan shook my hand and Claire hugged B goodbye. It was surreal. It was also, if I'm being honest, intoxicating in a way I'd never experienced before and haven't since. There's something about that level of secrecy that heightens everything. Every conversation feels more alive, every moment feels underscored, like you're always half an inch away from the edge of something. But here's what I know now that I didn't know then. That feeling isn't intimacy. It's adrenaline masquerading as connection, and eventually, the adrenaline always runs out. About 8 months into the affair, I started to notice changes in B's small ones at first. She'd cancel our lunches more often. She'd be distracted when we were together, looking at her phone, laughing at things she didn't explain. I told myself she was just busy. The neighborhood association had taken on a big project, a park renovation, and B was coordinating volunteers, grants, suppliers. There were meetings. There were obligations. I wasn't worried, I was patient. Then one Friday night, Ryan mentioned casually that B had taken up a new fitness class. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, apparently. Some kind of reformer Pilates thing a few towns over, recommended by a friend from her book club. He said it with a kind of fond, slightly resigned amusement. You know, B, always finding the next thing, and B smiled over the rim of her wine glass without looking at me. I registered it, I didn't say anything. The following Tuesday, I told Claire I had to work late. I drove to the studio Ryan had mentioned, because he'd mentioned the name, the way husbands do when they're proud their wife is taking care of herself. And I sat in my car in the parking lot across the street, like some kind of cliché from a movie I'd have laughed at 6 months ago. B's car was there, she was in the class, I felt like an idiot. I drove home, I told myself I'd imagined the shift in her. I told myself that whatever this was, we'd both agreed from the beginning it wasn't leading anywhere. That was the understanding. We were married. We weren't leaving anyone. This was a thing that existed in its own sealed-off compartment, and it worked precisely because we both respected the walls of it. But something had changed. I could feel it the way you can feel weather before it arrives. A few weeks later, B canceled on me with less than an hour's notice. No explanation, just a brief message. Something came up, sorry, and then nothing. I waited. That evening I sat through the usual Friday gathering, and B was warm and normal, and I caught her eye exactly once across the table. She looked away first. After Ryan and Claire went to the kitchen to refresh drinks, I leaned over and said quietly, "You doing okay?" She smiled. Of course, why wouldn't I be? You've been hard to reach. I've been busy, she said, and then Ryan came back with a wine bottle and that was the end of it. I spent the drive home replaying every interaction we'd had over the past 2 months, reassembling them into a shape that made sense. I came to a conclusion I didn't want to admit. B was pulling back, and it wasn't because things had cooled between us exactly. It was something more specific than that. There was something she wasn't telling me. The confirmation came from an unexpected source. One of our neighbors, a woman named Donna who'd lived on the block for 30 years and functioned as the neighborhood's unofficial historian and gossip archive, mentioned something to Claire at a block association planning meeting. Claire mentioned it to me over dinner the following night, in that offhand way she had of relaying neighborhood news, without drama, without agenda, just filling in the texture of the day. Donna said she's seen an unfamiliar car parked in front of B and Ryan's house a few times, on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, apparently. She thought maybe they were having work done on something. I kept my face very still. Huh, I said. I told her it was probably someone from the park project. B's been coordinating a lot of contractors. Yeah, I said, probably. That night I lay in the dark next to Claire and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, the same nights B was supposed to be at Pilates. I didn't sleep much. I'm not proud of what I did next. I want to be upfront about that. I know how it looks. I know what category of person it makes me, someone who is conducting their own affair while simultaneously, essentially, investigating their affair partner for conducting one of their own. I'm aware of the irony. I'm aware it's not irony at all, actually, it's hypocrisy. But I'm trying to tell you what happened honestly, and what happened is that I needed to know. The following Thursday, I parked 2 blocks away from B and Ryan Street and I walked. There was a dark blue sedan I didn't recognize sitting in front of their house. I noted the plates. I stood there for about 2 minutes feeling like the worst version of myself, and then I walked back to my car and drove home. I didn't confront B right away. I sat on it for almost 3 weeks, during which time our Friday nights continued as normal, during which time B and I had exactly one brief lunch that she steered towards small talk, and kept to 45 minutes, during which time I became increasingly certain that I knew what was happening and increasingly furious about it, in a way that I had absolutely no right to be. And that's the part of this I keep coming back to. I was angry. I was genuinely, gut-level angry, the kind of anger that sits behind your sternum and radiates. I'd lie awake running through the possibilities, who it was, how long it had been going on, whether she'd been seeing someone else the entire time she'd been seeing me, or whether this was newer. I thought about all the times she'd canceled, all the distracted afternoons, all the clipped messages. I thought about how careful we'd been with each other's secrets. I told myself the anger was about honesty. That we'd had an understanding, and the understanding involved a certain kind of mutual trust, and that trust had apparently been unilateral. But underneath that, if I'm being honest, and I'm trying to be, which is the whole reason I'm writing this out, I was also jealous. I was jealous in a way that made no sense given my situation, in a way that I had zero standing to feel. I was a married man having an affair, nursing jealousy over my affair partner potentially having her own affair. I want you to sit with the absurdity of that for a second, because I had to. I finally texted B and asked if she could meet me for lunch. She took a day to respond, which was unusual. She said yes. We went to a Thai place we'd never been to together, neutral ground her suggestion. She was already seated when I arrived. She looked good. She looked a little tired around the eyes. You wanted to talk, she said, before I'd even taken off my jacket. Yeah, I sat down, I looked at her. Something's going on with you, I've felt it for a while. She was quiet. She turned her water glass slowly on the table. Obey. I know, she said finally. I've been meaning to talk to you. There's someone else, I said, not a question. She looked up, her expression wasn't guilty, exactly. It was something more complicated. It's not like that. I saw a car at your house, multiple times, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. The color shifted in her face. You were watching my house. I went past. That's not, she stopped. She set down her water glass. You don't have any right to do that, you know that, right? I know, I said. I know that. I'm telling you what I did anyway. She sat back. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I couldn't fully decode. His name is Marcus, she said. We met through the park renovation. He's an architect the city brought in. We've been seeing each other for about 4 months. 4 months? I did the math without meaning to. 4 months meant it had started while we were still seeing each other regularly. 4 months meant the distance I'd felt, the cancellations, the distraction, they'd been happening while she was building something new. Okay, I said. I was going to tell you, she said. I was trying to find the right way. And Ryan, I asked. Something moved across her face. Ryan doesn't know about either of you. I nodded slowly. And what does Marcus know? She hesitated. He knows I'm married. Does he know about me? She looked out the window. No. I'd known all of this was coming, in some form, since the night I'd sat in that parking lot outside the Pilates studio. But knowing something is coming doesn't really prepare you for the weight of it when it lands. I felt something deflate, very quietly, somewhere inside my chest. I think we should stop, she said. She said it gently, not like she was swinging something at me. I think it's run its course. I think we both know that. I thought about arguing. I thought about saying any number of things that had been circling in my head for weeks. I thought about asking her what the difference was between Marcus and me, why Marcus was the one she was choosing, what the last 2 years had meant to her. I didn't ask any of that. Yeah, I said. Okay. We ate lunch. We were polite. We were careful. When we left the restaurant and stood on the sidewalk in the thin November light, she hugged me, not the way she used to, the way you hug someone you've decided to reclassify. We're still good, she said into my shoulder. As friends, as neighbors, we're still good. Sure, I said. I drove back to my office and sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could make myself go in. You'd think that would be the end of it, and for a while, it mostly was. B and Ryan remained in our social circle. The Friday nights continued, though they became less frequent as the winter wore on, everyone busier, everyone hibernating a little. B was warm and normal. She and Ryan seemed, from the outside, exactly as they always had. I watched Ryan top off her wine and touch the small of her back, and I felt something I couldn't name and didn't try to. Claire never suspected anything. Not during the 2 years, not after. She moved through those months with the same steady, organized goodwill she'd always had, planning a kitchen renovation, training for a half marathon, being exactly who she was. I watched her sometimes, and felt something enormous and wordless pressing against the inside of my ribs. In the spring, about 4 months after B and I had ended things, Claire and I went to a neighborhood barbecue at the park, the same park B's renovation project had transformed, actually, which struck me as a kind of private joke the universe was making at my expense. The park looked genuinely beautiful. There was a new pavilion, new plantings, freshly painted play equipment. B had done a remarkable job. I was standing near the grill talking to Ryan when a man walked over and introduced himself. Tall, dark-haired, easy smile. He was with the city's planning office, he said. He'd worked on the park project. His name was Marcus. Ryan shook his hand enthusiastically. You did incredible work, Ryan said. B talks about you all the time. Wouldn't have come together without you. Marcus smiled. B's the one who made it happen, he said. Across the pavilion, I caught B's eye for a fraction of a second. Her expression was perfectly composed. She smiled at something the woman next to her said. I turned back to the grill and flipped a burger that didn't need flipping. Here's where it gets complicated. Here's where I need to actually ask the question I've been building toward, because this is the part I can't settle in my own head. About 3 weeks after the barbecue, Ryan called me. On a Wednesday afternoon, out of nowhere, not a text, an actual phone call, which Ryan almost never did. I stepped out of a meeting to take it. Hey, he said. He sounded strange, tight. You got a minute? Yeah, of course. What's up? There was a pause. I need to ask you something, man, and I need you to be straight with me. My stomach dropped about 6 floors. Okay. Is something going on with B? Has she said anything to you, or has Claire said anything weird? I stood in the hallway outside the conference room and tried to keep my breathing even. What do you mean? I don't know, he said. She's been different for a while now. I can't put my finger on it. We had an argument last week, which we basically never do, and she said some things about the marriage that I wasn't expecting. I'm trying to figure out if I'm losing my mind or if something's actually happening. I stood there for a long moment. There were about 17 different ways I could respond to that question. I was thinking about all of them simultaneously. She hasn't said anything specific to me, I said finally, which was technically true. Ryan exhaled. Okay, yeah, I'm probably just, you know how it is, you go through phases. Yeah, I said, absolutely. Thanks, man, he paused. Hey, you and Claire want to come over Saturday, I'm doing ribs. Sounds great, I said, we'll be there. I stood in that hallway for a full minute after we hung up. I thought about Ryan's voice, the way it had sounded uncertain, which was not a register I'd ever heard from him before. I thought about the argument he described, the things B had said about the marriage. I thought about Marcus, and the way B had looked at him at the barbecue, and the particular quality of Ryan's handshake that afternoon, warm and oblivious and entirely trusting. I thought about what it would mean to say nothing. I thought about what it would mean to say something. I didn't tell Ryan. I've gone back and forth on that decision more times than I can count. I've tried to dress it up in various justifications. I had no proof of what B was still doing, only what she'd told me, and maybe it had ended, maybe they were working through it, maybe it wasn't my place. I've told myself that telling Ryan would have required telling him everything, including my own involvement, including 2 years of Friday nights that were built on a foundation of something other than friendship. I've told myself that blowing up 2 marriages, instead of potentially one, wasn't a net positive for anyone. I've also told myself I was just a coward, that I was protecting myself as much as anything else, that I looked at Ryan's trust and his ribs invitation, and I took the easier path because the harder one cost too much. 6 months later, B and Ryan separated. I heard about it from Donna before either of them said anything to Claire and me. Donna said she'd heard it wasn't working out, said it with the particular careful neutrality of someone who knew more than they were saying. I told Claire later that evening, and she was sad in that genuine, uncomplicated way she was sad about things. That's heartbreaking, she said. They always seemed so solid. Yeah, I said, they did. B moved out in January. Ryan stayed in the house. He seemed okay, or at least he seemed like a man who had decided to seem okay, which sometimes amounts to the same thing. He still waved when he saw me in the driveway. He still shook my hand. I shook it back. I don't know what happened between B and Marcus. I don't know if they're together now. I moved, Claire got a job offer in another city about 8 months after B and Ryan split, and we packed up the house and went, and that was that. New city, new neighborhood, new association president who does not kiss anyone on the lips. Claire doesn't know, she still doesn't know, we're still married. We're different than we were, I think. Better in some ways. The renovation she did on the kitchen turned out beautiful. She ran the half marathon and then another one. We talk more than we used to. I don't know if that's something I caused or something that was always going to happen. I think about Ryan sometimes. I think about that phone call and the way he sounded, and the window I had, the specific, narrow window, where I could have said something and didn't. And that's the part I can't resolve. I keep turning it over, not the affair itself, not what I did or didn't feel for B, not even what I did to Claire. Those are their own reckoning and I hold them separately. What I can't settle is Ryan, whether I owed him something, whether silence was a form of complicity, or whether it was just self-preservation dressed up in better language, whether there's a meaningful difference. I didn't ruin his marriage. B did that, with or without my help. But I sat across from him every Friday for 2 years, and I took his handshakes, and I ate his ribs, and when he called me, confused and looking for something solid to hold onto, I gave him nothing. I've been thinking about writing this out for a long time. I guess I needed somewhere to put the question, because I haven't been able to answer it myself. So, aita, not for the affair, I know what that was, but for staying quiet when Ryan called, for choosing the version of events where I just didn't exist in the story. I had something he deserved to know, even if knowing it meant burning everything down including myself. I chose not to give it to him. Was that self-preservation, or was it just cowardice dressed up in better language? I genuinely don't know anymore, and maybe that's the whole point. Am I the asshole for staying silent when my friend called me for help, knowing what I knew, because telling the truth would have cost me everything too?